So once upon a time, there was this guy named Newton, and Newton was one of the first people to study motion fundamentally. He came up with these three laws that looked at the relationship between force and motion, all right? And so what were these three laws, all right? The first law was the law of inertia. It said an object in rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. And so for each of these laws, we'll look at why he came up with these ideas, all right, how we can understand them. And also, these things are quite intuitive, right? And he was trying to explain why things are the way they are. And so we're going to try and understand why he said these things, all right? Now, his second law gave rise to one of the most used equations in mechanics, all right? It was the law of mass and acceleration. It says that acceleration of an object depends on the mass of the object and the amount of force on the object. Again, very intuitive things, all right? And the third one, you might have heard of this one, the third law of motion, all right? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So let's look at all of these in detail. The first law, okay, the first law of motion, the law of inertia. Let's say your phone was on the table, right? So your phone, it's nicely sat on the table, just like that, all right? There are two forces acting on this phone, all right? Let's see if you know what they are, all right? The first force is acting down. It is gravity. What? Well done, man. Yay. All right, the second force is the normal force, all right? You might not know about this one, right? But it makes sense, right? The table is pushing the phone up. Otherwise, the phone would just fall through the ground, all right? So at this moment, your phone is at rest. It's not moving. But let's say you go and pick it up. Then all of a sudden, there is now this force applied, all right? And this force applied is greater than the force of gravity. And so therefore, there is an unbalanced force, all right? And his law of inertia makes sense. All of a sudden, the object will now move in the direction of the force applied, in the direction of you picking it up. All right, and that's super duper cool. All right, it makes sense to us in our heads. All right, the second law of motion, as I said, giving rise to one of the most used equations in mechanics. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. Super cool. Let's label these things, all right? So F is force, mass is m, all right? And A is acceleration, okay? So let's look at an example. Let's say there's a car on the road, all right? So there's a car on the road, all right? Let me just draw my fantastic drawing of a car, all right? Maybe it's a truck, who knows, all right? And this truck is accelerating towards the right. And the engine is applying a force on the wheels, and the wheels are applying a force to the car that are making it go towards the right. And so it's important to note that the force, all right, if we're saying that's force and saying the yellow is acceleration, all right, acceleration cannot be denoted by an arrow, but I'm just trying to help you understand this, all right? Only forces, okay? And so the force is going towards the right. And as you can see, the acceleration is going in the same direction. Again, making sense, all right? But now, it's important to understand that, yes, they are going in the same acceleration, okay? But the mass of the object will affect the acceleration, right? And how much force you need to apply, right? And to understand that, let's say you were in the gym, all right? And let's say you were trying to bench. And all of a sudden, you're trying to bench 20 kilos on each side. So you're trying to bench 100 kilograms in total, right? You need to pick up that bar, move it down slowly, get it back up, right? So you're applying these forces on trying to get back up, okay? But the fact is that this is 100 kilograms, right? And because it's 100 kilograms, we can say that acceleration is equal to force divided by mass, all right? And the mass is huge, okay? So therefore, to get a high acceleration, you need a high force. And that's why it's so hard to pick these things up, because all of a sudden, we need such a great force. Whereas if it was just a bar and it was just 20 kilograms, all right, that makes sense. Again, very intuitive. So the third law of motion, maybe my favorite one, okay? And the third law of motion, it says that an object, all right, if we try and apply a force to that object, the object will apply a force in equal and opposite direction, okay? And you might be confused. Well, let's look at an example. Let's say you're trying to push a wall, all right? I know you're not going to get up and try to push a wall, but let's just look at the example, right? My teacher told me this example, all right? So you're trying to push this wall. Now, from the first law of motion, all right, the law of inertia, we know that this wall will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to push the wall. Hey, I'm applying this force applied, all right? All of a sudden, hey, but shouldn't the wall move? But then you're like, well, I understand why the wall's not moving. The wall's just super heavy, man. There's no need for this. There's no need for these laws, all right? But there is, because why is it that the wall's not moving? And it's because the wall is applying a force on you. The wall is pushing you with an equal and opposite force. These two forces are of the same magnitude. That's why the wall isn't moving. There is no unbalanced force. The first law of inertia says an object will remain at rest and is acted upon by an unbalanced force. So it's going to remain at rest because there is no unbalanced force. And so there's actually this curve that looks something like this, okay? And I mean, this isn't very technical, but like, let's say you're applying this here as your force applied, boom, boom, boom. The wall will supply another force against you until a certain point, and then it will just drop because the wall will eventually move, right? And that's kind of just the basics, all right? Don't take my word for that one because it's just basics, okay? And that kind of makes sense because when we break a wall, you know, with a sledgehammer or something, okay, that's not a sledgehammer, okay, stop. But, you know, it breaks because all of a sudden there is an unbalanced force and the wall's not able to push back. And it still will, you'll feel the vibration in your hand, okay? But, you know, it will break because all of a sudden we're breaking that threshold of what it can apply back. Okay, again, just very basic. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a happy, great day. You know, it's curated. Stay happy, stay healthy.